Hello and welcome to today's show. I'm Lindsay Francis and this is Human. Today, I'm incredibly excited to be talking to Sarah Fardon. And Sarah, you come today as a PR guru, marketing and strategy expert, mountain enthusiast, and dog lover. So, of course, we've got loads of things in common and loads to talk about. But before we start, let me just say this. Bright Lights Big City runs a little chill through my spine because, of course, it ruins your sleep and messes up anything that we're doing with Sophrology. But you've just left the city for a new life in the countryside. Tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Lindsay, and lovely to be here. Yes, I have. I've broken out of the city. I was in London for 12 years and had an absolutely wonderful time. Obviously started in an office environment, and after the pandemic, we weren't really required in offices as much anymore. And I've taken the opportunity, because of the kind of role that I have, to break out. There is still electricity. Wi-Fi is interesting, but yeah, I'm still keeping a kind of loose hold on London and visiting every fortnight. But it's an exciting move, and I think it was time to break out.
Well done. And I love the fact that we get to talk a little bit about post pandemic living because things have really changed. And it's changed a lot of things for lots of people in many different ways. Tell us a little bit about the sort of work that you're doing now that you're not in London and how that works for you.
Yeah, I think one of the silver linings, to be honest, of the pandemic was it did show that we could work remotely. But I think there's a lot of virtue in people getting together as well. So the work that I do is a lot of working with clients on their PR strategy and communications. I'm building a lot of AI into what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm working with a really cool tech platform at the moment and some of their amazing clients as well, just to kind of be a bit more intelligent and automated about how we can link clients' content to the journalists that are looking for those sorts of stories. So I'm still able to go to London, as long as the trains allow, twice a month and get together with the team. But we are a fully remote organisation. There's somebody based in Exeter. I'm in Worcestershire, and people are in London as well. And then we work with clients across Europe. So it's great to be able to work, from the countryside basically, or from the city when I need to as well.
Amazing. And how has that countryside living changed the way you feel, think, and live?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's put a lot. I mean, the one thing I would say is that I had a wonderful time in London, and I certainly didn't kind of leave with my tail between my legs. I look up at the city very fondly. I've still got lots of friends there, and obviously the working environment's there as well. I think moving to the countryside, I think my walking pace has slowed. I think it's made me appreciate the fact that you can work in different environments, and people do have different contexts that they're working in. I'll take breaks through the day to do physio exercises or to take dogs for the walk. Other people have got kids that they need to be picking up from nursery, or people might be doing different things in the city as well. So I think it's just kind of highlighted that we can work in a lot more of a distributed way. And for me, I think the real benefit is that I'm in a place where I've got things that are really good for me. I've got, space for the dog. I've got fresh air. The Malvern Hills are a 10-minute drive away. I can go and I can be outside and do my activities.
Sounds absolutely amazing. And there's a real balance here, isn't there? Because moving between the city and the countryside, as we do, does give you the best of both worlds. But I think when you're in it, you sometimes don't realize what effect the busyness has on you. Can you remember the thing that you sort of are most pleased to have got rid of in terms of that busyness from city living?
Yeah, and you must have found this as well, going to the Alps. But I think, and there were definitely ways that in an urban area you can find space and you can find calm, and there were some beautiful green spaces there. I used to be on Hampstead Heath every morning with the dog. Most things revolve around the dog, obviously, and being outside. But I've forgotten the question now. What did you say? I'm so
It was
sorry.
it was about finding that sort of stillness. So what's the bit you don't miss the most? What's the most difficult thing about city living? And I think that conversation about green spaces is so important. How easy was it to find that green space and that stillness when you were living in the city?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, completely forgot the question. I think you can find those spaces in London, and it's funny. I worked for a sustainability event, and they had a speaker that talked about urban nature and trying to find those green spaces and that kind of thing. But it is more arduous, and maybe it makes you appreciate it a bit more. But I think certainly being out of the city, I think the pace of work is the same, and that's a good thing. But the pace of life is definitely more just a bit calmer. I think I feel a bit like a rabbit in the headlights coming into Paddington now, and I've only been gone 3 months. But it's just suddenly everybody's in a rush and they seem a little bit cross, and that's probably a slightly damning view on the general population of London trying to commute, and I'm kind of dawdling around the station. But yeah, I think in a very long-winded answer to your question, I think it's the pace for me, and in many respects that's something that draws people to London in the first place, and the pace is fun and it's what people want. But I'm very happy in my countryside manner now.
Think people do love that stimulation, the bright lights, big city feel. But there comes a time when you think, actually, uh, I'd rather have more of one and less of the other. And I agree with you that that hustle and bustle is just sheer volume of people,
Mm,
of traffic, of noise. But I love the fact that you refer to urban nature as being a solution to stillness, because you're right. If you can find that, you're halfway there to just finding a bit more peace and stillness, I
yeah,
think, in
definitely.
the day,
And
especially
you
in
make
in
a
that
point
chaos.
about, oh, sorry. You make a good point about the volume as well, and I think that was the key thing for me, is that it's not necessarily that I don't that the pace isn't right. It's just that I don't need it all the time. I don't need to live in it, and sometimes you can have that particular thing, but it doesn't need to be there all of the time. So I still get my little flavour of the city, but just not always.
Yeah. And I love the fact that we have got this flexibility post COVID now with remote working and the improvement in technology. Um, it has a flip side, of course. I'm also seeing clients who are feeling more lonely um,
Mm.
because of some of the isolation that comes with remote working and that lack of connection on a daily basis. But again, it's a balance. Is there anything you've done since moving to help maintain a connected community?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of virtue to people doing completely remote work, and it does give that flexibility, and I think it gives access to a lot of talent that people didn't have before. If you've got people that aren't kind of geographically um not bound, but you know what I mean, as in you can work with people across borders and that kind of thing. um for me, it's being a bit more structured with trying to make sure that I am um, having those connections with people and organizing things. So making plans, whether it's where I'm working at the moment, we get together at least once a month, if not more, and we're all in the same space, and we're together and talking, and that's really productive. Actually, they're really, really good sessions. Um, and just, yeah, being more organized with making plans, and also with not making plans as well. And actually, I think it was one thing that you showed me was one of my most connected times previously was on the dog walk, because I'd be doing all my jobs and I'd be poor people on the receiving end of my voice notes when I'm kind of pacing around Hampstead. But actually, it's learning when to disconnect as well, and being able to just stick your phone in your pocket and just walk around and enjoy where you are at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're recalling that, because I do remember in our sessions we talked a lot about stillness
Mm,
and versus busyness, and we talked about what does your day look like, and of course you've got to walk the dog, you've got things to do, and we talked a lot about using that dog walk as time to be still and meditative rather than using it as a time to contact people, catch up on voicemails, listen to podcasts, etc. Tell
mm.
me, tell me a little bit about how that might have changed your thinking moving forwards with that sophrology experience.
I think it's structured it a lot more, and I think it's helped me get the discipline to be able to be more present in some instances, but also to disconnect in others, because I think things can be so frantic, and that's not within the M25. That goes for being in Worcestershire as well. So I think it's to be completely honest, when I first came across Sophrology, I was a bit of a skeptic. I thought, oh, this is silly, this isn't. And it was only when we actually did the sessions, and obviously I met you and, found out more about it, that you realise that by being a bit more disciplined and a bit more honest with yourself and just challenging those, obviously very ignorant assumptions that I had previously, that you can just do a lot of benefit in quite a small period of time as well.
I think that's one of the benefits of sophrology is it is so effective in such a short amount of time,
Yeah.
in terms of the number of sessions that you need with a sophrologist to learn the method, but also the amount of time it takes a day. 3 minutes really is enough. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's enough just to give you that reminder of what you're doing in terms of the physical, the visualization, the
Yeah.
breathing, just to dial back into that nervous system and that calm sense of stillness and peace where we can
Exactly.
navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's trying to kind of embed that into your day to day, and especially in more stressful situations, where you might be spinning multiple different plates, or trying to juggle things, or make difficult decisions, or that kind of thing. I think just being able to take a step back and actually invest the time. I think it certainly made a big difference for me, and somebody with a relatively short attention span and fairly kind of cynical, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's definitely been a 180 for me.
I love that because I am also a cynic. And when people say, for years, why don't you try meditating or yoga? And I think, what a load of nonsense. I'd rather get back and start weightlifting.
Yeah.
We are the classic example of people who are, consumer driven, ambitious, working super hard. So when it comes to trying to take a moment out to pause, you really want to see a bang for your buck quite quickly, or you lose interest. And I think that's also okay, because the method has been constructed in such a way that it works. It really
Mm.
does.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, Stillness and sophrology and breathing. We also did some work on the nervous system, if you remember, and we used a wheat band for a little while. Can you remember what that experience was like and how that changed things for you?
Yes, I distinctly remember actually being I was on a a Lime bike cycling back, and I'd whizzed into town to do. I used to do a workout called November Project, which is a kind of 6 a.m. workout at the Duke of York Column in London. Great fun, completely free. I really, really loved it, and I'd whizzed into town to do this, and then I needed to get back and to get my day's work started. I'd had a horrendous night's sleep the night before. And I remember you'd sent me a fairly concerned voice note to say, your HRV is not looking particularly like this is the right choice of activity at the moment. And you were completely right, and I think that's what the Whoop showed me. And I probably need to have a deeper look into some of those analytics as well. But I think it gives you a better view of what you should be doing in certain situations, and actually encourages you to listen to your body a bit more, because I'm definitely the sort of person that is non-stop. I'll get up, I'll do the workout, I'll come back, I'll walk the dog, I'll start work, I will just keep going until I fall asleep, and then I'll hopefully and then do the same again. So whereas I think having, and we are in a quite a health tracking society at the moment. There's been a few articles about that recently, but I think having that insight into when it's a good time to do something, and versus not doing it because it's for the sake of it. When you're trying to drag yourself to the gym sometimes and think, oh well, but actually it might quite rightfully be because you're not in the right frame of mind or physical state to do it. So yeah, that's been interesting.
I think that's always the trick as a sophrologist, especially with the way I work with the coaching and the psychology background as well. When you're engaging with a client and you're watching the data, for me to then say, just checking. I see that you've had 4 hours sleep, but you're going to the gym, and I've just seen you hit a strain score of 13. Have you got a day off? And the answer is, of course, I haven't got a day off, Lindsay. I'm really busy and I can't stop. And
Yeah,
and it's a bit like being somebody's, the voice on their shoulder that says, "Can you be a bit kinder to yourself?"
yeah.
because it's super hard. Anybody who's got a background in personal training or sort of that sort of physiology knows that non-functional overreaching is something that we do all the time. We think we're training, but because we're not training in an optimal state, we're not actually really reaping any benefits of the training. So
No.
if we haven't eaten enough, we haven't slept enough, we're dehydrated, we're cold, we're hungry, we're tired, any training that you do is not going to be as effective than if you were training in an optimal state. And
Yeah.
maybe those mornings when you were zooming across London to get, was it 5 or a 6 a.m. start?
I will have left at about 5:15, I think. So yeah, it normally wraps up by about 7, and then you have a nice coffee, and I was then whizzing back so that I could be online to catch up with work and things like that. But it hadn't been a particularly good night's sleep. But
I
yeah, I
think
think just trying to kind of listen to those signals and not fire on all cylinders, because it can be detrimental as well. You know, you could go do that training session and injure yourself, or um yeah, there's so many things that play into it. So I think the data side of it is super interesting.
it is exciting. And some people have sort of said to me, you know, I know my body really well. Why do I need a piece of data or technology to tell me? Well, the great thing for me is that I can see it as well.
That
Actually,
accountability.
I'm doing at the moment, which is, well, I mean, I'm running the group on WHOOP, and it's called Men 45 Plus. And of course, they're extremely competitive. So I see them going to bed earlier and earlier and earlier. And then they're in the group like, by the way, tonight I'm having a drink, which means they haven't had a drink the other 5 nights because they're trying to get a better
Mm,
recovery score than the rest, which, you know, should we be making people competitive to change their behavior and their health? Well, it's an individual metric and conversation, isn't it?
yeah. No, definitely. And I think there's a lot. This thing I was reading the other day was all around kind of anxiety around health tracking, and there's so much
Mhm.
data about everything, and to what point is it a bit destructive, because and I was definitely one of those people as well, that I, especially because I'd had a lot of trouble sleeping, I didn't want my app to say, oh, when you were awake at this time, because I was like, I know I was. I don't need the reinforcement. But I think, look, delving more into it, into the the HRV and the strains and stuff like that then will correlate other behaviors that will then help you sleep, or make you understand why you weren't necessarily sleeping, whether that's drink or strain or otherwise. So yeah.
I do hear people say that, Sarah, actually. I don't want to know. And
Mm.
I think, oh, that's really funny. I don't need to know. I don't want to know. It'll make me more anxious. And,
Yeah.
you know, in the years I've been doing this work, and I actually have a client with health anxiety, the
Mm.
data has been incredibly helpful because it presents a really tangible view of when things are going really, really well.
Yeah.
And it's really the baseline. You know, we're not all starting from the same place. So all we're looking is to have a little bit of change or maintain in those cases. And of course, that data does help them know that they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm going through a physio program at the moment, and I've got an app for that, and it's recording how much sleep I'm having, things like swelling and like post surgery swelling and stuff like that, how many steps I'm doing, what sort of exercises I'm doing. I'm a massive part-timer with that as well. Sometimes I'm really interested and think, oh, this is really helpful, and other times I won't fill it in for a week, which isn't ideal for my physio. So I'm a big data, for not being a particularly numbers person. I'm a big data nerd. I love Strava and that sort of side of things as well, and being able to, be a bit more measured about how you train and what you put in, and that kind of thing. But I can see why some people might go the other way.
I think taking a break from the data is always useful as well.
Yes.
And that is important for people to feel they've got permission just to take it off for a week or leave it alone for a while, and then come back to it, which is also super interesting. And I'd love to see what happened if you were to try it again, to see what happens to that data. And
Yeah.
I've, in terms of my range of people that I track, I've now got people from the age of 14 to 74 wearing boot bands.
Wow. Ooh,
Let's
that
just
must be really
say
interesting, actually.
clearly the algorithms were built on young fit men, I think. So at either ends of those scale, you've got the algorithm percentages, or the sort of the calculations that it's making sometimes look a bit weird.
Yeah.
But the base, yeah, the baseline data is always, the heart rate variability, and sleep is always consistent. Yeah, it's been really interesting to see.
I wonder if they'll expand that then and try and train it a bit more on a kind of broader demographic. So that'd be quite an interesting analysis, wouldn't it, to see how those changes track through.
I think they will when more people are wearing them. But I go out on my travels and I haven't seen many 74-year-olds wearing Whoop bands, although, this particular person could start a trend.
In my unpacking, I have actually located the Whoop band, so maybe we'll very limited unpacking. So yeah,
if you could put on an older relative for a month, that might give us another window into the world.
Yeah, well, there's two here. Yeah, I'll see if I can.
But actually, it's been fascinating because what we're seeing, of course, is a very different heart rate as people get older, and of course, when people are very, very young. And the strain score is not always recording in somebody that's that much older. But I did have a particular phone call the other day from this person to say, I've been to Pilates and I got a strain score of 9. It was amazing. I think it also rewards you, with great numbers.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a great device. I used to work for somebody that was absolutely obsessed with his, and he would sit me down and he'd be like, look, what was yours today? And we would have to sit and go through the dashboard. So he was very excited that I had one.
I think it's great, and I spy on my kids with them as well, so I can see what they're up to. Of course, they do just take it off if they're going to go out and go out all night. But it's a really fun thing to talk about, and it's a really nice way to connect with people.
But that's why I brought up Strava as well, because I watched my brother run the half marathon at the weekend, and I actually covered about 11K just tracing the round. But somebody was holding a sign that says, "If you stop for a break, I'll pause your Strava." And there's a whole kind of, if it's not on Strava, it doesn't happen. But I think it does motivate a lot of people to, whether they're benchmarking against themselves or other people, all of the Strava clubs and that kind of thing. But I think you do have that accountability to a sense of kind of what you're doing that would motivate you. But then you want that motivation to come from just, doing the race yourself and finishing it as well, obviously. But
we live in a world where we do tend to post everything, and I think you're right. If it's not on Strava, did you actually do it? I work in the other way, where I think, how many secret things can I do that nobody knows anything about? And I have that little glory moment to myself. So it works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely.
The number of people I know who will say, they'll tell me about, because I ride a road bike, they'll tell me about a bike route they've done because they've seen me do it. And then they're like, I'm going to go and see if I can go quicker than her. And I'm not particularly fast, but people are that competitive. They'll be like, oh, did you do that loop up such and such a col and la la la? And I'll be like, yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, I did it too. In fact, I was quicker than you were.
So annoying.
I'm a stalker. But if that's what gives people their kicks, carry on. I put the data out there, so
I guess it's just what motivates you, isn't it? But it's like, although I had to check myself a couple of weeks ago, because I went there are a couple of people that I went to school with that run a kind of wellness. In fact, if you're ever over, we should go. It's really nice. But they run a wellness centre on a lakeside, and do lots of open water swimming and that kind of thing. And they do sunset swims every month. So I went last month, and just basically hobbled in, because I'm fairly long out of surgery. But anyway, hobbled into the water and thought, I'll just see how I get on. I'll probably just do half a lap or something. And then just really enjoyed it more than I've ever enjoyed, apart from in the lake, in Montreal, more than I've ever enjoyed an open water swim. And did the full lap, did the 750 meters, which is the furthest I've done since the ARP. But halfway around, I thought, oh my God, I haven't got my watch on. How am I going to record this? I wonder. And then I thought, I wonder if I could find someone else that's got a watch, and then they can tag me, and then I can see. Or I wonder if I can draw a circle around the lake and put it on. And it was like, Sarah, just enjoy the swim. What are you doing? But you do just go to this, I need to share this, I need to record it, I need to document it. And actually, no, just enjoy the swim, just get around the lake and be pleased with yourself.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? Because I think we just are automatically programmed now to look for that external validation. I've
Yes.
done it, so I want to share it because I want to either tell people about it or talk about it, or I want them to say, "Oh, well done, you did a sunset swim." Um, but by staying really present in the moment, of course, that's where all the joy really is.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
we come out of that and fast forward into something else, and as soon as we leave the present moment and our mind is in tomorrow or in yesterday, we're not enjoying right now.
No, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that working with you taught me with the sophrology as well, is controlling that mind drift, because it does go. And I got into the water and immediately started thinking about a blog that I'd been writing earlier for a client that was just quite interesting. And then I was thinking about what I was going to do when I was going. And then I went down this rabbit hole of what am I going to do about Strava? And it was only then that you kind of come back and you think, stop it, enjoy yourself, be in the water, have a nice time. And that is possible. I probably would have put it on Strava had I got my watch on, but that's not the point. So.
Tell me about that mind control, because of course our mind does go all over the place, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
constantly floating about. What's been the most helpful way to keep your mind on the present moment? Can you think about that?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think it is that discipline, and it's almost like, the cartoons where you've got like the angel and the devil on the shoulder, and you're like, shut up. But I think it is trying to have the acceptance that there are going to be things that are coming in that you want to think about, and there are going to be times when you absolutely need to be thinking about those. But there are other times when actually it does you a lot of good to try and boot them out and be a bit more present. And I know I keep coming back to it, but honestly, the dog walk was the big thing for me, because that was really my admin hour of, okay, well, I'll badger people with voice notes and I'll get all of this and that done and the other, and actually just being there. And again, if I'd have listened to myself a couple of years ago, I would have thought, oh, gosh, you're being so cheesy, shut up, this is ridiculous. But it is true, you're being there, you're throwing the ball for the dog, but you are just, I think it's just giving yourself a bit of time back as well. Because otherwise you're in about 8 different directions and thinking about different things and probably not being particularly productive. Whereas if you've got that, 30 seconds even of just quiet, and I'm not very good at quiet time, but just that small amount of just shh is a good thing. But it took me a while to get to that. And I laboured that point slightly as well. Sorry.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But you're so right. And something I see a huge amount as a parent is parents with children, and then they're on the phone at the same time. So
Yeah.
children might not be on the phone, but the parent is. And I think, oh gosh, when I was parenting my kids, we just didn't have phones available like that. But you're missing the moment. And yourself, you go for dinner with somebody and you're having a conversation and they pick up their phone.
Yeah.
You know that suddenly you're not their attention, you're not their focus. They've gone somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And some, like, 9 times out of 10, life does get in the way, and there's a reason that they're on the phone and they need to get things sorted, and there's logistics and other things that need to happen. But I think there are definite, and I remember really clearly actually, after my niece had just been born, and it was during Wimbledon, and we all went over to my sister's house. She won't mind me saying this, but we all went over to her house, and it was the men's final. And I was actually working on site at Wimbledon at the time, and we didn't want to know what the outcome of the match was because we were going to watch it later. And so we had a phone amnesty, and we all just put our phones in the basket and just sat outside in the garden, and obviously met the little one. It was my mum's birthday as well, because both nieces and mum will have birthdays in the same week. But it was just really nice, and I still remember that specific afternoon for that reason. So I think we are, for many good and bad reasons, we are conditioned to be very attached to the device. But I think it was something you shared about that signal that you give to somebody if you've got your phone on the table, that you're not 100% there, or yeah, I think it's interesting.
I think especially when you're at the meal table, it still astounds me, the number of people that will sit and then put their phone on the table.
Mm.
I mean, you wouldn't go to a restaurant 15 years ago and, put a great big phone handset there in case somebody phoned you, because you're having dinner. And the fact that they do it, especially if especially if you've cooked for somebody and their phone then appears on the table, I think, gosh, that's just so incredibly rude. And of
You
course,
say you can do it in London. Get stolen.
exactly what you keep in your pocket or your bag. But it is a weird thing, isn't it? And I've often thought when I've been to, especially if we've gone somewhere very, very special for dinner, I've observed couples who are clearly on a date and they've spent an extraordinary amount of money on this meal, but they're on their phone with someone else whilst having dinner with someone else. What's that all about?
But you see restaurants as well that Instagram particularly, I think, is an imagery is so much built into the like experience design, whether it's people's dishes or restaurants. You see like and bars and stuff like that. You've got bars like Tonight Josephine where they've got they've got so many photo ops in a bar because they want people to come in and take pictures and share them. And I think a lot of that design thinking goes into not design thinking, but as in the thinking on that design goes into the setup of these restaurants and bars and stuff like that as well. Even around Worcester, there are little bits of graffiti and they've got a hashtag and then a handle that you can take pictures in front of and tag and stuff like that. I sound old and all social media, but
As a PR consultant, Sarah, that's a really interesting point. That
yeah,
organisations are really focused on making the experience Instagrammable,
yeah,
when actually the experience should be about the date you're going on or the time you're spending. It's weird, isn't it? What a
yeah.
shift.
It's clever, I think, because I'm a bit of a nerd in that respect, though. I just find it quite interesting. I like it. I'm like, oh, okay. I wonder why they've done that. And I'm probably way out. I'm probably about 20 years behind, but yeah, I do think it's quite interesting.
I love it. And I can't resist going, if you go to a really fancy toilet in a restaurant and they've got like, I was at Sophrology the other day and the Brasserie of Lights got pink marble bathrooms. I was just desperate to go back to the table and get my phone to take a photo. I was like, this is a bit weird. Middle-aged woman goes to the toilet with her phone. But then I thought, well, everyone else is doing it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe it's okay. But
I used
yeah.
to be a part of a Facebook group, a bit niche, sorry, you can cut this bit out, called Sinks of the World. And it was a group of us that we recognised that between us, we travel to so many different places through work or just being lucky enough to be able to travel to lots of different places. And so it was a bit of a kind of a parody group of just reviews of different sinks in different toilets, and you would see them as opulent bathrooms, and then just a dreadful like weather, not tarring every Weatherspoons, but let's be honest, but like just some more chavvy ones, but they would do like a serious Trustpilot style TripAdvisor review. It probably still exists, actually, Sinks of the World, if you need a bit of
I'm going to go and Google it now and see what comes up. But maybe we can put that on our LinkedIn and see if we can attract any new business that way.
Sinks of the World.
Yeah, Lindsay and Sarah have a great podcast, and then they're talking about sinks. No idea how that links in.
Concept though, because it's like we're all seeing the same things, but yeah.
It's fascinating. We could now start talking about the use of LSD and psychedelics to really see different things, but we won't, because I also have got some strong views there as well. Can I ask you about sleep?
Yes.
Because, well, you tell me what your sleep challenges were.
Yeah, so my and this links to devices as well, actually. I think I was thinking about this earlier, but my sleep was dreadful. I used to get really, really bad sleep terrors. So I'd wake up normally about an hour and a half, 2 hours after I fell asleep, and just would assume that I'd just fallen asleep in the wrong place, would go tearing around trying to pack up all my things, and then realise that I had quite a lot of things already there, which must have meant that it was actually my bedroom. But they were nasty. I used to see it, just really, really nasty, to the point that I was frightened about going to sleep. So it really would impact, and then you would be so kind of freaked out by what had happened that you'd be awake for a long time afterwards because your heart would just be racing and that kind of thing. And I still do it occasionally now, but it's interesting now that I'm in a better kind of mental headspace. They're just a bit funny. I'll just think there's a flamingo on the windowsill or something, or not like proper hallucinations, but like shadows will make different shapes, and you just get a bit confused sometimes. So, but I did a sleep study, so proper kind of Back to the Future, or the thing stuck on your head, and they said I had deep sleep arousal, which isn't as exciting as it sounds. But just basically, you just kick out of. I think you go into, you'll know more than me, but I think you go into REM and then kick out of it suddenly, so you're in that kind of mid state. So yeah, I think a lot of it was exacerbated by stressful situations. So when I was going through harder periods of life, the terrors would be awful. And when things were better, then they'd still happen occasionally, but it would just be kind of whoops, and then go back to sleep again. But that's an area. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
But I think that's an area that I found that sophrology made a big difference, because I was more controlled about how my mind was moving before I went to bed. And sometimes I'd actually go to sleep mid-exercise as well, which is quite nice.
I think that's great. And it's beginning to notice that brainwave state, isn't it? When we go from alert to relaxed to dreamlike to asleep.
Yeah.
And understanding that we have a little bit of control over that sometimes. And especially if we become decent meditators, we really can begin to drop into these different levels of consciousness, which are really important. It's like mental filing, Sarah. If you haven't done it, your brain's going to start mental filing in the middle of the night, reorganizing what's been going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say to the person that said, I'm simply too busy to do any of this meditation or sophrology malarkey?
Well, it's difficult to reason, because that was me. It's difficult to reason with people like me. I was definitely that person, and I didn't think I had time. And I'm somebody that doesn't have kids or time, as much time pressures as other people might have either. So I think, and again, I'm stumbling, sorry, but it's difficult to say to somebody that you can make time, because I know people that the only time they've got to reply to people is if they're sitting on the loo on their phone, because there's no other time that they've got. So I think it wouldn't go down very well for me to say, you can be a bit more disciplined with the time. I think the only thing that I can say is that it's worth it if it's possible. And it's just finding a way to make it possible. And for me, it was when I was going to bed, or just being quite strict about scheduling it during the day. But then I do have that luxury to do that. So I think in a very warbled, you wouldn't think I worked in communications, would you? But I think in a warbled way, I think it's not necessarily making the time. It's just understanding how the benefit that it will bring, and the fact that it is worth it, I think.
Yeah, and here we are some time after your sophrology sessions, and you're still using some of those tools, and it's still proving effective, which is why I'm the method's been around since the 1950s, and there's a reason for that. So yeah, it's a delight to hear. It really is. I just want to ask you about the importance of routine, because you've alluded to it about a sleep routine. And I know that also from your sports background and some of the activities you've done, you know that a routine is important. What are your thoughts if somebody said, "Oh, I haven't really got a routine," or why do you think routine is so crucial?
I think we're creatures of habit, aren't we? And the more that we kind of default to that habit, the more straightforward it is to be able to get done the things that we want to get done. And I've certainly found that since moving from London, that my routine's completely gone out of the window. It might even still be in London, I don't know, but I think when you're juggling lots of different things, it's difficult to have that routine. It takes a bit more discipline to be able to plan and to have it. But I think, again, building in those habits is really, really important. So for me, it's getting up and knowing I'm going to get up, I'll walk the dog, I'll come back, I'll have a cup of tea and a chat, and then get cracking with my work, and try and be a bit more kind of timetabled about the day. But then I guess not everybody has that luxury.
I think there's a personality type and also some learned behavior here. And I couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more. We are creatures of habit because a routine keeps us safe. It saves energy mentally, physically, and emotionally. We actually are subconsciously predicting what's coming up.
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever seen the trick where they suggest you plug your phone in somewhere different at night and
Yes.
see what happens
Yeah.
in the morning. And of course, what happens in the morning, you default to go to where it's normally plugged in. Um, these are subconscious behaviors that drive up to sort of 80 or 90% of what we do.
Mm.
We can drive our car without being fully aware of what we're doing, which is terrifying. Um,
Yeah, I've done that before, and you think, oh my god, what happened in that journey?
where have I been?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
can you imagine what other emotional reactions we're having or things we might say as a knee jerk because we're simply not conscious of what's going on
Yeah.
because that's how we've been designed. Quite
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
And of course, your experience with night terrors would tell you that. It's a very frightening thing.
But it's influenced by habits as well, and I did do some CBT as well. Um, and that's what brings me back to the phone, was that they actually said that you're very, very emotionally tied to your device, whether you accept that or not. And you can put it on flight mode, on silent, under the floorboards, but you still know that it's there, you still know that it's under the bed. Whereas actually, if you have it in a completely isolated different room, there's something in your actually psyche, head, mind, that knows then that it's not there and can kind of detach a little bit. And again, it was just I was cynical with that as well, just that's ridiculous, but okay, whatever, and would put it in a drawer. And I slept a lot better just knowing that there wasn't then that temptation, because the first thing you do when you wake up is you look at your phone and think, oh, what's going on. But not having that temptation. And it also meant that I had a really, really horrible sounding old school alarm clock. So I did actually get out on its first ring, because it honestly it's horrible. I've changed it now, but yeah, it's not nice.
Right. Anybody that fancies buying an alarm clock, tell me, best place to buy an old clock?
Oh gosh, just keep
Oh,
it
of course.
classic.
If you're not in the UK, you might not know where that is. I'd imagine for £4.99, you could probably buy an old school alarm clock and leave your phone. In fact, I say to clients, Sarah, please leave your phone in the car. Not if you're somewhere where there's a lot of car crime, but do you need your phone from 9 at night until 6 or 7 in the morning? Well, no. So leave it in the
Mm,
car, shut the door, lock the car, come in the house.
yeah,
How many people do you think have ever actually done that when I've suggested that?
it makes me feel quite nervous thinking about it. I'm like, God, what if it rings? What if
Well,
I...
it's a weird one though, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do that?
Same principle, isn't it? Yeah.
It's bonkers, isn't it? We've actually had 2 holidays now where I've left my phone behind. Um, so physically left the phone at home, got in the car, and obviously gone off to the airport, which is great until you have to do something like a visa check-in that's only online, and then you have to borrow your husband's phone, or you suddenly remember something you haven't done, and there's physically no way of doing it.
Mm,
Your credit card doesn't work because you're abroad, and then the PIN number comes to the phone, and you've left the phone behind. It is
you're,
quite dramatic how dependent we are.
you're in real trouble without your phone, to be honest. I found that with COVID as well. We travelled between time that we were allowed to travel, and I may have misplaced my phone in a hedge, and it may or may not still be there. But trying to fly back without a mobile phone was an impossibility. I missed the first flight. They wouldn't let me on it because you couldn't show. Two-factor authentication meant you couldn't buy any new flights. You couldn't. I couldn't show the form that I wanted to show because I couldn't log in because they wanted to text me. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. It's easier to lose your passport, I think, now.
I think you're
But then
probably
on the flip side, some people do pay for holidays that are unplugged. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no phones, because they want that kind of digital detox. So 6 of one.
tell me about
for.
Detox and phone-free or tech-free holidays. What are you seeing in your sort of marketing sphere about the popularity of these things?
I know somebody that's just been on one, and they came back feeling very happy and refreshed, and I can see the appeal because you from a marketing perspective, I think it's a whole new market. I think there's a lot of people that are in that subset that do want to just switch off and unplug, or whatever the phrase might be, and you can completely understand that, especially when you're working in a space where you're on your phone 24/7, and there isn't really an escape, and especially when you are working remotely, you're not in an office, there's less discipline around when you close your laptop and stuff like that. So but then other people want to be able to go away with their families and record stuff and take pictures and be able to show people what they've done. And so I guess it's just another one of those holidays. I think it's just funny, isn't it? Because it used to be, oh, this hotel's got Wi-Fi, that's good, and now it's, oh, this one doesn't have Wi-Fi, that's good. So, but I remember when I did a Everest base camp trek about 6 years ago, and we stayed in tea huts every night. And the first tea hut that we got to, they were selling these little coupons where you could buy 15 minutes of Wi-Fi. And I was secretly quite excited to not have signal for that time, because I thought, oh, I'll just bank up all my photos and just have a nice time. So I felt a little bit disappointed, because the first thing we all did was go and buy our Wi-Fi codes and then sit down, and I just thought, we're in the Himalayas, what we did. But I did, complete hypocrisy, I bought one and I did it as well. But yeah, it's strange.
I think it's an odd thing, isn't it? You go somewhere that beautiful, and we have the same thing in the mountains. You're somewhere that's just awesome, and you pull out your phone to capture it. Well,
Yeah.
actually, you can just capture it with your eyes and your brain. That's what they were designed for. Well, I can't share
Yeah.
that with anybody. Well, you could paint a picture, you could write a blog, you could describe it. But we're slightly losing that creativity, and we are in strange times.
Yeah. I think, but the thing is, I don't know whether you do necessarily, playing devil's advocate, whether you lose the creativity or whether it's just allowing more people to be creators. Because if you think about, especially with the way that AI is working at the moment as well, the things that people can do, with those images and like social media content and stuff like that, I think it allows a lot. Well, I mean, as somebody that can't paint, it does allow people to be a lot more creative in different ways as well. So I think with everything, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? But it's certainly changed people's behavior and the way they kind of consume experiences.
I think we could do a whole new podcast on that. Actually, digital
Certainly.
detox, free holidays, whether it's creative, encouraging creativity or stifling it. And I
Yeah.
think there's probably enough debate on both sides to keep going for quite a long time. But and it's not you can't paint, Sarah. It's just you haven't learnt yet how to paint.
People have tried to teach me. Yeah, it's not colouring in. I'm warming to. I've got one of those mindful colouring books. It's just the patience. I need to work on my patience a bit, I think.
I know that you've got many other creative talents, so it's always nice to be balanced about this and realise where your strengths are, where they're not. The final thing I really wanted to ask you about also was Spartan, because you have had a really exciting Spartan experience. So for anybody who doesn't know, maybe you could explain what it is and explain how that's been part of your life.
Yes, so Spartan is a brand of obstacle course racing, which is a perfect fit for me because I'm basically a child or an old lady. There's no in between, but it's a really, really good experience and a very, very good physical challenge as well. So it tends to be a mix of trail running, and then more physical obstacles. So whether you're climbing over walls or you're carrying ridiculously heavy boulders or chains or that kind of thing, but it's a great team exercise. It's a great way of meeting people. I've done a number of them in the UK, and then when I spent the summer in the Alps, my first foray into summertime mountains, which was fantastic. We realised that there was one. Well, not we. I realised that there was one in the Alps, and as with everything in the mountains, if you put an obstacle race in the mountains, it will be exponentially more difficult because it's on an incline, and but it's still one of the best races I've ever done. I've done it twice. I've wanted to do it 3 times, but I think next year will be the one. But yeah, it's a big physical feat, but amazing atmosphere as well.
Huge challenge, and it's a great event to do. So are we putting that in the diary for next year? Perhaps I might join you and we could do some training together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'll hold that's what it's recorded now.
Why not? Why not? I think we should aim for that. And it is a fun one. And you're right. Childlike learning and childlike fun. For me, anything that involves mud, water, messing around, mountain biking, and the glory I get when I'm covered in dirt. Not that dirty a person, but I came back yesterday and I had quite a lot of mud on me, and I was like, oh, I quite like that.
We're quite rugged.
It was a really nice feeling, and I came in this morning after a cold water swim, and I was covered in grass, and
Oh,
it was making a mess in my house, and I was like, oh, this is really good.
were you in the?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's still not that cold. But yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. So
It's actually quite hardcore. Although I forget, and then I still try and flirt with people. It's like, Sarah, that's not the one. But
that's a conversation about aging, definitely for another time. I reckon we've still got it though, Sarah, don't you?
I mean, you'd probably do. I'm on a pause for. I think it's It's all happening in 2025, Lindsay. I think Spartan dating. We'll see.
I think the Sophrology visualization exercise, visualizing the future, would be a fun one for us to do perhaps next time I see you on the chat, because it always brings up some really interesting things. And you say to people, oh, did you realize that was in your sort of future thoughts or your future desires?
Yeah, definitely up for that.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, that is just amazing. I am so pleased we've had this conversation. And for anybody that would like to find out more, the best way to find either of us is on LinkedIn. I'm under Lindsay Francis, and you're there, Sarah, masquerading as yourself.
Yes, Sarah Fardon. You'll find me there.
So until next time, see you soon.
Thank you.